folks, and welcome. This is Dan from Tabletop Gaming Guild. Before we begin, if you liked the video, maybe hit like. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel. Today, I am going to explain the game Last Will. Last Will is a card-based engine builder style game designed by Vladimir Suchi and put out by Czech Games Edition. In the game Last Will, the group of players all have a shared relative who has passed away. This relative has decreed that each of us receive a stipend, an amount of money. Whichever one of us can spend it the most extravagantly and quickly gets the full amount of his estate. The goal of the game is to be the first player to declare bankruptcy. To declare bankruptcy, you have to have sold off all your property and depleted your cash reserves to 0 or less. You can go negative in this game. The winner of the game is the person who has the least money at the end of the round, in which any player can declare bankruptcy. Usually towards the end of the game. I've seen it happen as early as round 5, but it can happen in round 7. 6 is typical for my group. If no one can declare bankruptcy, then it is simply the person with the least amount of money at the end of the 7th round. At the beginning of the game, each player gets 3 of these helper cards and 3 of these property cards. Then picks 2 cards. They don't have to be different. You could end up with start with 2 helpers or start with 2 buildings. And discards the remaining. The game takes place over up to 7 rounds. It can end early. During each round, there are 3 major phases. The first phase is planning. In turn order, players pick one of these plans. The board is currently set up for 2 to 3 players. There's slightly different configuration at 4 to 5. To pick a plan, you're effectively picking 4 different things. You're picking your relative turn order, the number of additional cards you will draw, the number of errands you can perform, and the number of actions that you can perform. During the planning phase, you will only worry about the first 2. If I picked this plan, I would immediately draw 2 cards. These cards can come from any of these 4 decks, and the game recommends that you pick which cards you want to draw and then draw all of them simultaneously. So maybe I would pick an event card and a helper card, and then those would come to my hand. Other players in the game would then also pick plans. So for the rest of the round, I would go before yellow in this case. Phase 2 is errands. Each player gets some top hat tokens that represent errand boys. This phase of the game works like worker placement. If I were going first, I would take one of my errand boys, put it onto a spot, and do what that spot does. These spots all on this board here just allow me to take one of the displayed cards. Here, there's 2 spots for 3 possible cards, so each round one of these will not be picked. On this board, there's a couple other actions that you can perform. You can take a board extension, which allows you to have more space for cards in your personal tableau. You can send your errand boy to the opera, which allows you to spend £2, 2 money. Or you can rearrange the housing market however you feel. There's just 4 different kinds of buildings here. Um, they're color coded: yellow, brown, orange. Mansions, manors, townhouses, and then farms. Once I place my errand and take my card, then each other player in turn order does their one hat, and then I would get to place my second. During the third phase of the game, you gain a number of actions based on the plan that you picked. 2, in this case, for me. And then everyone can simultaneously perform those actions. If you're playing with new players or for the first time, you may want to do this sequentially just to make sure that everyone's getting it right. Especially in the first round. Once people get it, you can go to simultaneous play. I'm now going to briefly go through the various kinds of cards and how actions play out with them. One kind of card are these helper cards. All of these cards that are currently in my hand are examples of helper cards. If you have a helper card in your hand and you want it to put it onto your player board, it takes an action to do so. This carriage card gives me basically a carriage driver that's always on hire for me, and therefore spends me 2 money a turn. That's the icon in the upper right there. And it does not cost an action for him to do that. This reservation card represents a standing reservation at a classy restaurant. This card costs me 4 money per round, but costs an action to do so. If you have a card that you've used, you can move it slightly down on your player board to indicate that you've used it. That way you know what you've done and what you haven't done for the current round. This Sea Dog has basically an always on ability. Other cards that have that sailing or wine icon on them cost 2 money more to play. This is good since the goal of the game is to lose all your money. There's a few cards, not many, that have this A plus in the upper left hand corner. These cards take 2 actions to put from your hand onto the table in front of you, usually because they're a little bit better. This Gentleman Club allows you to spend 5 money for an action. Helper Deck is really filled with a bunch of cards that allow you to enable strategies in this game. This Real Estate Agent allows you to add or subtract £2 from the cost of any building that you might buy or sell. This Steward allows you to visit one non-farm property without spending an action. Visiting the property will, of course, cost you money, or maintaining the property will cost you money. This handy dandy reference sheet is on the back of the rule book and should be accessible, especially during your first few games. Another kind of card in the game is these properties. All the cards in my hand now are examples of properties. If you have a property in your hand, you can buy the property by spending an action and putting it onto your player board. The cost of the property is always equal to the highest dollar amount there on the left, plus or minus whatever the modifier is in this market. So, because you're trying to lose money in this game, you want to buy as high as possible and sell as low as possible. This yellow building right now would only be 6 to me, 8 minus the 2. Whereas this farm would be 16 to me. Non-farms get this little depreciation marker at the end of any round that you did not maintain a mansion, townhouse, or manor house. The value of the property depreciates. If you want to go to maintain a mansion, townhouse, or manor house, it costs an action for you to do so. This mansion would allow me to spend one money to maintain it. If I have used a companion, specifically a lady companion, to put in this mansion, it cost me 5. Farms never depreciate. Visiting this farm, which does cost an action, is normally 2 coins. But if there's a horse on the farm, it's 4, and if there's 2 horses on the farm, it's 6. The next kind of card I'm going to talk about is these companion cards. There are 4 different kinds of companions in the companion deck. You can randomly draw chefs, guests, horses, or dogs. If you have a companion card in your hand, you can play that card to effectively put that companion onto one of your properties at the cost of an action. So I could play this guest card and put this token on this mansion, and now this mansion will cost me $5 to visit/maintain instead of 1. Same deal with the horse. If I discard the horse out of my hand, spend an action, I can put a horse token on this farm, and now visiting this farm will be $4 instead of 2. Additionally, one of the cards that is available on the central board is this companion wild card that can count as any one of the 4. The last kind of card in the game is the event cards. The event cards are all one-time effects, effectively. Um, these do not go onto your player board. Playing this carriage, I just play it and I spend 2 money. If I can play it with a a a guest, a companion, it'll be 4, but I'm discarding the additional card out of my hand. I'm sorry, this pair still only costs 1 action because that's what the base card cost. This boat trip costs 2 actions. You see the 2A in the upper left hand corner. And it spends $2, but you can see that you can get considerably better if you've got the right companions in hand. It could be $5 with just a dog. You take a dog on the boat trip, sure. Or, it could be $7 if you've got a dog plus one of the other 2. Before I wrap up, I just wanted to point out this board over here again. I had it covered with cards before. These 2 spots are always special cards that come out of these 3 decks up here. The cards that are in these decks are just slightly more efficient versions of cards that you might find in one of the other 4 decks. You can also do some pretty interesting things with these special cards. Like there's a card that allows you to throw a wild party, which rapidly depreciates your properties. There's also a card or two called Hectic Day that allows you to gain more actions during your third action phase. Um, these spaces do change somewhat over the course of the game. In the first 3 rounds, this space is one of these special red backed cards, but in round 4 and above, it's just the other copy of the companion wild card. This slot is property in the first 3 rounds, but then it switches to white cards for the end game. This slot is one of these helper cards, but then again also swaps to white cards towards the end of the game. This slot is always a helper card because you always need a helper. Hey folks, I think that wraps it up here for Last Will. If you think I made an error or forgot something, please write a comment down below. I love learning games, but we all learn better when we learn together. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you would like, do the YouTube things, like the video, or subscribe to the channel. You can also check the links. See you around.